Welcome to something special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
That was the Joel Johnson Trio playing an original piece by Joel Johnson called I Love the Springtime, with Joel Johnson on the guitar, Michael Backen on the drums, and Jack Straub on the bass. Let's give them another thanks.
Okay, so we are going to try and do an experiment today. And each of you has been assigned to a clapping group on the back of your name tags, either A, B, or C. And each group is going to clap in a specific pattern I'm going to show you, okay? So everyone with an A on the back of their name tags, please raise your hands. Cool. I'm going to show you the clapping pattern, then I want to do it together with you. It is as follows. Let's do it together. Easy.
Okay, B's, raise your hand. Okay, if you're a B, we're gonna clap like this. Let's practice. Okay, great.
And C's, you're going to clap like this. Let's do it together. Okay, cool. So what we're gonna do now is when we say go, we want each of you to clap in the pattern we just showed you. And afterwards, when we say sync, we want you to try to synchronize your clapping pattern so we're all clapping together, okay? Do we need a repetition of the clapping patterns? Yes? Okay, I thought so. Okay, Group A.
Group B.
Group C.
Okay, is everyone ready? Okay, so we're gonna start. Ready, set, go.
Sync. Wow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Isn't that amazing? Without any coordination, we were able to synchronize our behaviors. And why was that so easy? That is because we want to be in sync with each other, with the people around us. When we're in sync, it is easier for us to listen, to understand.
Lately, a lot of us have felt like we've been out of sync, out of step, missing the beat, misaligned, not in the groove. We have been missing the connections that make us feel human. Today is about us working our way back to being in sync. TEDxFSU this year is dedicated to helping us get aligned, connected, attuned, and just helping us get in sync with new ideas with those around us.
Today, we're going to explore ideas from students, alumni, and faculty. Ideas about health, aging, service, robots, vulnerability, drugs, nature, and surviving. This TEDxFSU is going to give you new things to think about, maybe even new ways on thinking about things. Our aim is it to help our community think better.
Today, we will sync our awareness on new ideas that are presented right here on this red dot that could change us and our world for the better. Welcome to TEDxFSU 2022 Sync.
I think this will stay here.
Oh.
I'm Courtney. I'm Pablo.
And I'm Courtney. We're part of a group of students who have been working tirelessly to make this production happen. You'll meet the rest of the TEDxFSU team at the end of the performance.
TEDxFSU celebrates the knowledge, talents, and ideas nurtured at this special place, Florida State University. Today, you will be hearing 7 presenters and 12 musicians, plus a tango will be thrown. So be prepared to be amazed.
You have already heard the Joel Johnson Trio, so let's thank them again.
Can joy be grown? Is it underneath our feet, or is it right before our eyes? When we turn to green spaces to grow new narratives, the concept of joy becomes expansive. Chris Omni guides us through a space where a different type of joy, black joy, is cultivated and cherished. She knows that if we can imagine that space, we can all become black joy farmers. Chris Omni is finishing her doctorate at FSU's art education. Please welcome to the TEDxFSU stage, Chris Omni.
Yay!
Greetings, my sister queens.
Oh my God, I messed up.
Greetings, my brothers. Greetings to everyone here to bear witness to the power of voice and agency of a Black woman. In this moment, I breathe for the vessels of vessels And I invite you to breathe with me. And by this, I simply mean that I breathe for the big mamas, the mamas, and the mimas. I breathe for the Gigi's, the Glammies, and the Gam Gams. I breathe for the abuelas, the nanas, and the omas. But in particular, I breathe for my grandma, Frances Johnson, who is no longer on this earthly plane. And I breathe for my granny, Alma Allen, who just celebrated her 96th birthday on March 21st. No matter what you call your vessels of vessels, grandmas tend to have a special place in our hearts. Ordinarily, they are loving, supportive, nurturing, and if you ask, a tad bit spoiling. And the nice thing about grandmas is that the older they are, the more wisdom they tend to possess. My granny is no exception to that rule. And after 96 years on this earth, Granny has definitely seen more than a few things. And more than a few things have definitely brought her joy. But if you were to ask anyone in her circle what brings her true joy, outside of family, of course, they'd all respond, gardening. So Granny, if you're watching or if you're listening from right there in Pensacola, Florida, this moment is for you. And with all pun intended, I give you your flowers now while you can enjoy them. Welcome to Granny's Garden. At Granny's Garden, you don't need a green thumb. And as a matter of fact, I strongly encourage you to remove that word from your vocabulary and replace it with green heart. For a green heart is a lot more spiritual. According to the Heart Chakra mantra, my heart is open to receive the energy of love. I radiate this essence. I walk my path with ease and grace. Growing with love makes all the difference at Granny's Garden. And we love what we grow. And when you visit our garden, you'll see the regulars, fruits, vegetables, succulents, and for Granny, we gotta grow flowers. But we grow something extra special here. We grow Black joy. Now, everybody here is familiar with growing the regulars, but you may be less familiar with growing Black joy. So let me explain it to you poetically. What is Black joy? Black joy is a statement. Black joy is a stride. Black joy is permission. Black joy is pride. Black joy is a form of resistance, and Black joy is a form of rest. Black joy is anything and everything you need it to be, because truly, Black joy is the best. And the unique feature about growing Black joy is that you don't even need to be Black to appreciate it. Sounds strange, right? Well, let's think about it. You don't need to be a vegetarian to appreciate or grow vegetables. Now, do you? So now that you have a basic understanding of what Black joy is, it is equally imperative for you to understand why we grow it. And that answer is simple: to provide a counter narrative. At Granny's Garden, we are tired of the typical deficit narrative that tends to surround Black people. For we are so much more than your nightly news headline. We are so much more than the sadness that you see on social media. And let me tell you, we are definitely so much more than the trauma that they put in the textbooks. For we are queens and kings with royal stories of true joy. And if the rest of the world's not going to tell our story, we will right here at Granny's Garden. Now, sadly, when you grow the regulars, weeds pop up. Weeds are invasive and they strangle and kill the very beauty of the landscape. And when you grow Black joy, weeds pop up too. But those weeds take the form of police brutality, mass incarceration, health disparities, and other forms of systemic racism. And unfortunately, we cannot prevent weeds from popping up. But we have the power to expand the community of Black Joy farmers and create a Granny's Garden in every community across the world, because it is through your individual effort that it adds to the collective narrative. And that's why we grow Black Joy. So that got me excited, y'all. You know what it is. You know why we grow it. Y'all came here to learn how to grow Black Joy. So before I tell you the 4 basic steps of how to grow Black Joy, I must give you some granny wisdom. This wisdom occurred on Thanksgiving Day, November 25th, 2021. I was sitting at the couch right there next to Granny, and I decided to do a little investigation because I knew that I got my love of gardening from my dad, but my dad got it from somewhere, right? The somewhere was sitting right next to me. So I turned to Granny and I asked, Granny, what is it about gardening that you love so much? Now, all of y'all here, you know that Granny is 96 years old. But what you don't know is that she has dementia. But in that moment, with pure clarity and sincerity, she looked at me and responded by saying, there is something about growing something that makes you feel alive. The frequency of those words when she shared them with me then and I share them with you now are so powerful. So as you get into the garden and you learn these 4 steps, never forget that really there is something about growing Black joy that makes you feel alive. Let's get growing. So 4 basic steps, and they all start with the letter S. We like to keep it simple here when it comes to growing Black joy. The step number 1 is soil. Do me a favor. The next time you go outside, I want you to look at all the trees. Now, I admit, I have a thing for trees. I'm biased. I think they're beautiful. But just go outside and look at the trees. Look at their height. Look at the branches. Look at the bark. Look at the way they dance in the breeze. Take your eyes all the way to the top and look at the crown. And then bring your eyes all the way down to the bottom and see what the rest of the world ignores. For that beauty that you just acknowledged above would not be possible if it was not rooted in a nutrient-rich, dark, brown, Black soil. And as a Black Joy farmer, we honor that space and we know the power of the soil. So that's why it's our first step. Step number 2, seed. I have a thing for trees. I already warned you. So just bear with me. An acorn is all of about 2 inches. But give it time and the proper growing conditions, this little acorn will grow to be an oak tree that's up to 80 feet tall and anywhere between 80 and 100 feet wide. That's magic. Well, actually, it's not magic. It might be magic to the outside world, but that seed already knew its potential when it was resting in your palm. Just because the world didn't see it didn't mean that the acorn didn't know it. We, Black Joy farmers, are that seed. We have a potential that resides so deep within that we know is there. And give us time and the proper growing conditions, we too will grow tall and wide, and the world will stop and take notice and see the beauty of growing Black joy. Step number 3, self-expression. I am the 3rd generation of Black Joy farmers. There we are. My granny, she grew flowers. She loved the aroma, she loved the color, she loved the idea of propagation. Generation number 2, my dad. He didn't grow flowers, he grows vegetables. And I think it's poetic because at my dad's core, he's a giver. So literally, he grows to give. And when I asked him about his growing practice, he said, I love to share my crop. And that's what he does. with his church family, with his neighbors, with his friends, with us. Enter me, third generation. I don't grow flowers. I don't grow vegetables. I grow rescues. I cannot pass a trash pile and see a discarded plant and not pick it up because somebody else no longer saw the value or the beauty in it. That's when I want to pick it up, bring it home, and bring it into the green kid family. I see potential in it all. Now, we're working on a fourth generation right now. My baby girl is 26. She's in Vegas doing her thing, and she likes to grow succulents. We're not at the love stage yet, so just bear with us. She'll get there. But to you, my expanded community of Black Joy farmers, realize that you grow what makes you happy and what brings you joy, what puts a smile on your face, because it's your individual effort that adds to the collective narrative. Step number 4. Now I want to get a little bit closer to y'all on this one. I need you to listen to me with your ears and especially with your heart. You know that green heart we talked about? The heart that's open to receive the energy of love? Because I want to pour some love into you right now. I need you to slow down. I need you to slow down and be present. The rest of the world will keep spinning. The demands of the day will keep piling up. But when will you press pause? When will you say no to the demands of the world until you say yes to the demands of self? Please slow down and be present. And Granny told me that she would spend hours in her garden and visit 2 or 3 times a day and notice that if it was leaning too much on one side, that maybe it was getting too much water. That if the leaves were wrinkly and brown, that it was getting too much sun. But she would also see the slightest change of green and know that that was the right growing spot. But that would not have been possible without her slowing down to be present, to understand the language of the landscape. We need to know the language of our inner landscape. Y'all just took me to church there. Let me come back. So now you know the 4 basic steps of growing Black Joy. You know why we grow it. You know what it is. You know how to grow it. That leaves me with one question. When? Now is the time to Blacktivate joy, to activate a new conversation about what's right with Black people rather than perpetuating that typical deficit narrative. So if you are ready to acknowledge the soil, plant a seed, come on now, engage in self-expression, and most importantly, slow down, I extend my hand to you. I extend my arms around you with this warm embrace of thank you. Most importantly, I say, welcome to Granny's Garden, where we know that there is something about growing something that what? Makes you feel alive. Happy growing, Ashe.
I love that.
Thank you.
Incredible.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm supposed to leave now.
Throughout this process, all of our speakers have worked with a team of student coaches. Chris's coaches were Zach and I. Our next speaker is Jared Lyon. In higher education, traditional students go directly from high school into college. That is the way we expect things to go. But Jared Lyon questions whether that tradition is always the best course. As president and CEO of the Student Veterans of America Association, Jared Lyon has seen how non-traditional students whose lives take them on a different journey can bring new value to the educational experience. Please welcome to the TEDxFSU stage, Jared Lyon.
Thank you so much. 1945, college and university presidents throughout the United States were preparing themselves for a wave of students arriving on their campuses. The college president at Harvard was noted to say that we may find the least capable among this generation coming to our college and university campuses and flooding our academic facilities. At the same time, in Illinois, the college president from the University of Chicago was noted to say about this population that they may well create educational hobo jungles on our campuses. He went on to say that providing financial support for this population could well ruin academia as we know it. And he was finally noted to say that the opportunity of an education is no way to cope with mass unemployment. Now, if you were trying to guess to yourself, who were these college presidents talking about as an incoming student population in the 1940s? I'll help you. It was World War II veterans returning home from their service to use their GI Bill to attend institutions. Unfortunately, college and university presidents had a miscalculation and an underestimation of the academic potential of World War II veterans. I'd like to tell you about my grandfather real quick. Pop-Up, as my family called him. Pop-Up was of this era, a first-generation American who enlisted in the U.S. Army alongside 3 of his buddies from his hometown in New Jersey. They'd go on to serve in the Army in Europe, and of the 4 of them, my grandfather would be the only one to return home alive. My grandfather used the GI Bill to earn an EMT certification, which served him very well until his family started to grow a little bit more, and he became an insurance salesman. My Pop-Up helped to launch our family into the American middle class, and I'm inspired by him. But what I'd like to do is share a story of 3 World War II veterans who also inspire me. First, I'd like to introduce you to a Black man born in segregated Mississippi in 1925. This individual will go on to serve in the U.S. Army, literally storming the beaches of Normandy. This is an individual who actually put his life on the line for his country. But his country had not just lived up to the mantra of as a U.S. Army soldier, he was separate, but not equal. He returned home with the desire to earn a college degree with his GI Bill. Returned to his home state of Mississippi, and he applied to his dream school, Ole Miss. But he was denied application because the University of Mississippi at the time was still a segregated university. Undeterred by his desire to earn an education, he took his talents and his new global perspective to a historically Black college, Alcorn College, now known as Alcorn State University. There, he became super involved while he was an undergraduate, even though he was a little older than everyone else around him. He competed in debate, football, track and field, even sang in the choir, and ultimately became the junior class president. He would even meet the woman of his dreams who he would marry and be with for the rest of his life, all at Alcorn. After he finished school and the crucible of war, upon graduation, he looked for his next challenge. And for this individual, it would be the opportunity to desegregate schools. After the decision of Brown versus Board of Education, he applied to the University of Mississippi again, this time to their School of Law. And unfortunately, as you might have guessed it, he was denied admission because of the color of his skin. So he leveraged this as a test case for the NAACP. And this led him to become the first field secretary of the NAACP in the state of Mississippi. There he worked to organize boycotts and to organize more chapters for the NAACP throughout Mississippi. He would go on to gain prominence for his success in helping to advocate to integrate the same school that denied him, Ole Miss, by helping an Air Force veteran become the first Black student to enroll at the University of Mississippi. This would also earn him the ability to be awarded the 1963 highest individual honor at the NAACP. If you're wondering the name of the veteran that I'm talking about, I introduce you to Medgar Evers. Evers had low expectations foisted upon him, both as a Black man in the United States, but also as a veteran trying to go to school after war. But But he didn't let those low expectations define him, and he moved to prominence and power. Unfortunately, there was a small-minded white supremacist who couldn't handle the power of a black man in the United States in the 1960s, and he assassinated Medgar Evers. In 1963, at the young age of 37, this hero was taken from us too soon, a martyr for the civil rights movement. It is said that Medgar Evers' assassination inspired President Kennedy to finally drive Congress to act on a comprehensive piece of legislation for civil rights. Ultimately, it would be signed into law after Medgar Evers and President Kennedy were assassinated a year later in 1964 by President Johnson. You see, Medgar Evers was willing to give his life to his country. And when he returned home with his courage of his convictions and his college education, he fought and ultimately gave his life so that all Americans could pursue any dream that they have. Medgar Wiley Evers was interned at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. History knows his name, and we remember his legacy. I'd like to share my second inspirational story of World War II veterans. At the height of 6 feet 2 inches tall, he was recruited out of high school to play basketball at the University of Kansas. At the age of 19, in the year 1942, he left college on a full-ride scholarship to enlist in the U.S. Army. He would eventually become part of the 10th Mountain Division, and as a second lieutenant, he was fighting in Italy, storming a German machine gun encampment, and he was cut down by enemy fire that severed his spine and shattered his right arm. Thought for dead, he was eventually moved to a military hospital close home in Kansas because medical doctors at the time didn't think he would survive. Fortunately for this individual, finding resolve in his situation, he found an orthopedic surgeon. He would affectionately refer to him as Dr. K. Dr. K actually is a survivor of Armenian genocide, World War I. And Dr. K operated on this individual 7 different times, helping him to eventually walk again by regaining feeling in his legs. He would get partial feeling in his left arm, and for the rest of his life, he'd remain paralyzed in his right arm. This individual, 3 short years after almost dying, used the GI Bill first at the University of Arizona, and then ultimately transferred a little bit closer to home to a school in Topeka, Kansas, called Washburn University. Majored in law, and while he was a student veteran, was elected to the Kansas House of Representatives. He'd graduated at age 29, just beating 30, and then he would eventually go on to become a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, where he served for 8 years, then becoming a United States Senator, where he would serve in the Senate until leaving office to run for President of the United States, famously having lost to Bill Clinton. If you haven't guessed by now, I'm talking about Senator Bob Dole. Senator Dole, after serving alongside his fellow Americans and becoming a veteran with a disability, gained a new perspective and understanding and became motivated to try to find civility and bipartisanship and not submit to political tribalism. Senator Dole was convicted to work with people whose decisions and thinking was different than his own. A lifelong Republican, he found a way to partner with Democrats and actually help to uphold American Civil Rights, Voting Rights Act. He expanded food stamps and Social Security. He even worked to help create Martin Luther King Jr. Day as a federal holiday. And he passed the Americans with Disabilities Act. Senator Dole passed away last year. I had the personal honor to serve as an usher at his funeral. And while standing alongside President Biden and President Clinton, I could see the true bipartisanship and civility that Senator Dole tried to inspire in others on full display. My third World War II veteran that has inspired me is a young woman who helped to make history when she enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps Women's Reserve in 1943. Her jobs would be secretarial in nature, driving a truck, or being a dispatcher. You see, in World War II military era, women were judged more by their gender than their capacity to serve. She didn't let that stop her, and she achieved the rank of staff sergeant, separating from active duty and ultimately going to college in Philadelphia using her GI Bill and then transferring to the School of Drama at the New School in New York City. Majoring in the arts upon graduation, she actually had a really successful theatrical career. But it wouldn't be until she gained a prominent role at the age of 50 that she moved to the small screen. She got a walk-on role as Maude on a TV show called All in the Family. She parlayed this into its own first spin-off for a sitcom called Maude as well. But it wouldn't be until the age of 63 that she would gain national prominence by getting the pivotal role of Dorothy on Golden Girls. I'm, of course, talking about Bea Arthur. Now, Bea Arthur didn't let low expectations drive her, much like Medgar Evers and much like Bob Dole. She leveraged what she knew to try to help others. And Bea Arthur, it is true, had a successful career in acting and was also a prominent veteran. But I believe one of her lasting legacies is in the creation of the Bea Arthur Residence for LGBTQ+ homeless youth. She died in 2009 of cancer, and her son was known to say about his mother that Bea Arthur championed innocence, animals' rights, children, LGBTQ+ youth, and Native American higher education. You see, she was an inspirational character that continued to find ways to serve others. And Bea Arthur has a famous quote in which she said, "You are what you love and how you give back." And so I'm inspired by Bea Arthur because she's a reminder to me that none of us are ever too old to pursue what's next. I remind myself of that during my late nights and early mornings as a full-time PhD student at Syracuse University pursuing my doctorate, while I'm also raising a beautiful little boy with my loving wife and working full-time at Student Veterans of America. That notwithstanding, I love higher education, and Bea Arthur taught me to do what you love. And I love the ability to make sure that veterans and adult learners have their fair access to educational opportunities. But I'll let you in on a little secret. I didn't always love education. For a long time, I feared it. If I'm being totally honest with you, for a while, I was really intimidated by it. My parents didn't go to college. So as a first-generation college student, I wanted to try to raise the expectations for my family. And if anything, I went to college because it was a personal goal, but I stayed there because my time in the military taught me, if nothing else, that often that thing you fear is exactly the thing that you're supposed to do. On August 5th, 2001, I enlisted in the world's finest Navy. I had joined a peacetime military. I left for basic training, and a month later, the world changed forever when the attacks on American soil happened on September 11th. At that point, my time in the military would change, but not just for myself, but for millions in my generation.
Lobbying.
Our time in uniform would now be during a time of war. I ultimately finished my time in the military and achieved an associate's degree, and then I became a transfer junior right here at Florida State University. When I first got that acceptance to Florida State, I was overwhelmed with gratitude. But when I first arrived in Tallahassee, I'll be honest with y'all, I felt like a little bit of a fish out of water.
Did you hear?
I was 28 years old and a junior, and I couldn't help shake the feeling that I didn't quite fit in. And what's worse is I started to develop the idea that maybe I didn't belong here. But ultimately, for me, I couldn't really shake the sentiment that I kept feeling over and over again. And I know it's a sentiment that many student veterans feel as well. And it goes something like, well, gee, thank you for your service. But let's be honest, if you were capable enough to get into college, how'd you ever wind up in the military? And it's this idea of low expectations that continue to persist. Because as we look at it, we somehow think that going from high school to college to next is what everybody does. But believe it or not, the research demonstrates different. At present, only 15% of all undergraduates in our country are what you would consider traditional students that take that path. 85% of students that are in college right now have taken an alternative path to their education. And that doesn't mean that they're any less college material. These individuals are more likely to be working parents. They're more likely to come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, commute to school, or be first-generation college students. And student veterans are no different. Now, since 1945, our ideas in higher education of who belongs and who should be included have improved for women, people of color, people with disabilities. But oddly, the data still seems to demonstrate that our impression of military service or a non-traditional path to higher education is still one that's looked down upon, about being not college ready. When we look at this population of post 9/11 veterans, we see a generation that has actually achieved higher GPAs. Nationwide graduation GPAs are at 3.47. The top 3 majors for this population of veterans in school right now are in this order: business, science, technology, engineering, and math, and health-related fields. And ultimately, they have a success rate higher than the national average. And when they graduate, with their educations in hand, they're less likely to be unemployed than civilians who have never served. All that notwithstanding, when we look at the population, I'm struck by something else. I'm a millennial, that generation born between 1981 and 1996. Now, my generation's not perfect. I mean, what generation is? But I'm struck with how similar we are to my pop-pop's generation. And when we ultimately look at it, we notice that in 1998, a gentleman by the name of Tom Brokaw wrote a book about a generation born between 1901 and 1927. They came of age during a time of 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and ultimately civil rights era. He renamed this population the greatest generation, but he did it 50 years after they came home from their war. I don't think we should wait that long. And for the generation who came of age on the American attack on September 11th, who survived the Great Recession, who are coming to leadership roles during times of civil unrest, racial justice, and a global pandemic with crippling debt, we have the opportunity to see what's next. I believe in the transformative power of higher education to shift the possible for our future. And if we can find a way to make education inclusive of all veterans and all Americans, we have the opportunity to redefine what the future looks like. Now, referring to any one group of people as the greatest generation might indicate that our best days are behind us. But I challenge each of you as you move out into the rest of your lives to be on the lookout for those that might help us define America's next greatest generation. Thank you all so much.
Jared's speaker coaches are Paige and me. We had an honor to be working with you. Thank you very much. What would it feel like to watch the cost of your survival skyrocket? From the age of 5, when she was discovered that she was diabetic, Emma Rudd and her family have watched the cost of life-saving insulin increase exponentially. But why? As a student in public health, Emma Rudd has advocated for ways to make survival affordable by reducing the cost of a drug that hasn't changed since its invention in the 40s. And she has been recognized with the Princess Diana Award for her work. Please welcome to the TEDxFSU stage, Emma Rudd.
At the age of 5, my life would forever be changed. When the doctors told my parents and I, when we arrived to the hospital, that if I had not made it that day, I would have not made it through the night. I was 5 years old and a kindergartner, and I loved school. I was ecstatic, healthy, but all of a sudden that changed. I recall being on my first kindergarten field trip, and as exciting as that was, all of a sudden I was extremely parched, and my mom was on the field trip, and she looked at me, and I told her I needed water immediately. My lunchbox was at the bottom of the bus, but I needed it immediately. As soon as she found me a water bottle, and as soon as I pressed it to my lips, I guzzled the whole thing down. Another parent that was on the field trip, she looked at my mom and said, "Gosh, how long has this been happening for?" She said, "Gosh, only a couple of weeks." And she said to my mother, "This is a sign of type 1 diabetes." And my mom said, that can't be true. That can't be it. We don't even have family history. And just a couple of days later, I was at a friend's house and the same thing happened again. But this time they gave me a juice box. And just within minutes of having that juice box, I was throwing up profusely. My mom knew something was wrong. She took me to the pediatrician, and as soon as I sat on that scale, I weighed 35 pounds at 5 years old. They started running vitals on me and told me that they were going to call us back if anything crazy showed up. And indeed they did. They saw that my blood sugar was extremely high, and they told us we had to get to the hospital immediately. My parents quickly made arrangements for my 2 other siblings, and we drove a couple hours down to Indianapolis, Indiana, where we were living at the time. And on the way there, they called our family and said, if you're not here soon, we're going to send an ambulance after her. As soon as I got there, just being 5 years old, I was crying, upset. They were holding me down as they were putting shots, taking blood draws out of me. And as a 5-year-old girl, I just wondered, what did I do to deserve this? What possibly could go wrong for me to hate shots? Everyone hates shots at a young age. Well, my worst fear just had come out. I went from being a carefree child at the age of 5 to now having a disease wage a war on every organ in my body. I went from having to just be able to eat whenever I wanted to giving shots, testing my blood sugar every 2 hours. And that week we spent in the hospital, my parents practiced giving each other saline shots just to learn how they were going to take care of myself. Now, what even is type 1 diabetes? So type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease where your body attacks your pancreas, killing all insulin-producing cells. And insulin is a hormone that allows for sugar to enter the cells and go through the process of producing energy for the body. At the time, I was going through this process where no beta cells were left and I had no insulin in my body. So without insulin and when I was consuming carbs, I would get extremely sick. And how does one develop type 1 diabetes? As I had mentioned earlier, I have had no family history of the disease, and in fact, only 10% of people living with type 1 diabetes have a family history of the disease. Now, if you have the genetic marker specifically located on chromosome 6 and then interact with a triggering environmental factor, such as you have another autoimmune disease, you live in a northern climate, you have a viral infection, you drink cow's milk at a young age, you can, in fact, have a higher likelihood of developing type 1 diabetes. And in fact, I did have the rotavirus at a young age. Now, that week we spent in the hospital, I was trying to look for the good in everything, and so were my parents, and they told me that they were going to take me to the Children's Hospital in Indianapolis, Indiana, and that's what I was looking forward to. And the first time we were there, that was going to be the first time I had to test my blood sugar in public. The 2-hour alarm went off, and I looked at my mom and said, it's time, and we have to go to the bathroom because I'm not testing my blood sugar in public. And she looked at me and she said, Emma Bella, there's nothing to be ashamed of. You have had something awful happen to you, but it's not your fault. It's something, we can make, it's not your weakness. And that really set the tone moving forward and how I was going to live with this disease and not hide it and show people, as a young girl, I can do anything and everything despite having this autoimmune disease. And adjusting back to school, wasn't easy, but every meal now, I had to have an insulin shot. It was one before breakfast, one before lunch, and one before dinner. And my mom came to school every single day when I was in kindergarten, giving me an insulin shot right before lunch. I remember her sitting at the kitchen table, counting out exactly 50 pieces of goldfish to make sure that I got 15 carbs and not anything more or anything less. And that was our reality. Additionally, as I had mentioned, every 2 hours we had to check my blood sugar. And this resulted in also all times of the night. Believe it or not, even when my blood sugar was low and I was sleeping, my mom or dad was able to stick a straw of juice box in my mouth and I sucked it down while I was asleep. So, we did make adjustments and adjusting to this disease, but it was almost like I was an infant again. It was almost like they were waking up every 2 hours to make sure I was just alive. Now, as I grew older and as I moved here to Florida and got to my first year of being back in being a fourth grader, a lot of people didn't really understand type 1 because the school I came from, everybody knew what type 1 diabetes was. And so I really wanted to educate other people. So I started doing educational presentations. And when I entered the 6th grade, right before school started, I sent an email to my principal and I also sent it to my guidance counselor saying, I really want to do an educational presentation at my middle school. And then the first day of middle school, middle school can be hard for everybody, but she pulled me aside the first period and said, Amabella, do you really want to do this educational presentation? Do you really want to be known as the girl with diabetes? And that shook me and took every little piece of what I had been fighting for out. How could I move forward with someone who, or something that maybe every student I was, going to school with would think there's a diabetes girl, and that made me question everything. But just a year later, I applied to Children's Congress, and I went to Capitol Hill to advocate to my legislators about the importance of type 1 diabetes funding, research, and education. And we advocated for the Special Diabetes Program, which funds $150 million to diabetes research every year. And when I found out that exact policy I was there advocating for, and along with others, students and kids, I was ecstatic, and I realized this was my passion, and government and policy related to diabetes, this is what I needed to work on. And then I went back to that middle school, and I did do that educational presentation. Thank you. Now, every year, along with my mom and other diabetes advocates, we go to Capitol Hill and advocate for important issues that threaten the type 1 community and also type 2 community. And we work to gain their support in advocating for these measures. So why is diabetes advocacy so important? So shortly after being diabetic for 1 year, I switched to an insulin pump. And this was the first insulin pump I was on. It was incredible. Instead of having to do shots every single day, I only had to change my insulin pump every 3 days. So that was one shot. Still had to prick my fingers and still had the scabs, of course, but this was a life changer. Now today, I wear another insulin pump, which I'm wearing right here, and it's incredible. It just has a tube. It gives insulin every day or every minute. I'm up here, and I've gotten insulin while I've been talking to you. And also, it connects to my constant glucose monitor, which I wear. This is my constant glucose monitor I wear on my arm, and you can't see it because I have a long sleeve on, but this monitors my blood sugar 24/7 using a little microchip under the skin, and it's been incredible. And I was able to try the first constant glucose monitor back in 2008, and it's improved so much since then. And that's all because of research dollars going to improve the lives. We, as type 1 diabetics, have a shorter lifespan, and these technologies will make those lifespans much longer. And it's just a relief of a burden that diabetes places on you. And additionally, this constant glucose monitor actually connects to my iPhone, and I can share this to anyone I'd like, my family members, my friends, and it relieves some of that burden that I'm not always fighting this disease by myself. Additionally, shortly after I was diagnosed, we got involved with the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation and started fundraising. We made a walk team, Amabella's Believers, unicorn on the front. Me and my passion, we were able to just organize and get people out there to support us in our mission to try to find a cure for type 1 diabetes. And that happened the first year I was diagnosed. We got over 120 people out there and raised over $10,000 just in that first couple of months I was living with this disease. And additionally, they invited me to go, and my family to go to Congressman Donnelly's office and meet with him and share our story. So my question to you, are research dollars the only issue when it comes to advocating for diabetes? I want to welcome you to your neighborhood pharmacy in the United States, where Big Pharma places a price on my life, on your life, and also on the vial that keeps us alive. This is insulin, and I need it to stay alive, and every other person with type 1 diabetes needs it as well. Currently, in the US, this is manufactured for $2 to $6, and it is upcharged to $250 to $300 a vial. This has led to people rationing the drug, choosing between their food, their rent, their electricity, water bills for this drug that keeps them alive. 1 in 4 people, according to Yale Diabetes Center, rations this drug currently in the United States. Our healthcare system in the United States is broken. And due to free market pricing, the United States list drug prices have become the highest amongst all developed countries. On average, the US pays 50% more in healthcare than any developed and regulated markets across the world. So insulin hasn't always been expensive, Why is it expensive now? These companies that manufacture the drug use patent evergreening. There's a lack of generic insulins, like other pharmaceutical drugs. You could just probably get a cheaper one. That doesn't exist with insulin. There's pharmaceutical benefit managers that exist and wholesalers, which price the drug to you, and they price it higher so that they get a check in their pocket. There's also a thing called price fixing, where individuals price the drug based on what the other corporations are pricing it at. And lobbying in the big three, which I will speak about in just a second. Only 3 companies supply insulin to patients in the United States, and these companies make up 90% of the global insulin market, resulting in they can do whatever they want. Why should you care? Why should normal, people that don't maybe necessarily rely on prescription drugs to stay alive worry or care about this? Well, according to Georgetown's Health Policy Institute, 66% of US adults use prescription drugs. So that could be you, that could be your spouse, that could be your child that relies on a drug to stay alive that is currently being price gouged in the United States. So what do we do? What do we do about it when these corporations are taking advantage? At the age of 16, I was fortunate enough to work with the Senate and the House to work on my own bill that I was really passionate about, working to bridge the gap between patients and also physicians who may not realize the symptoms of type 1 diabetes, because as I mentioned, they're very subtle and very, very much go misdiagnosed. So I was able to work on that, and that was filed in the state and the House, or the state and the Senate, and that was amazing. It made me realize, I do have the power to speak up and share my opinions about policy. But then additionally, my first semester here at Florida State University, I was able to work with Senator Janet Cruz, who's been the sponsor of the insulin bill for the last 3 sessions. And she and her office asked me to look at this bill and give my input on how I felt about it. But there's still a reason we are working today, unfortunately. Pharmaceuticals lobbying spent $353.94 million lobbying our government last year. They use these expensive drugs, these expensive therapies to fund their own agenda and interest back into the price and to guard their price. Now, when we first started this first session on the first insulin copay cap here in Florida, we were really excited because the Senate passed it unanimously within the first committee, and then we turned to the House side. And the House side, the first committee it was supposed to go through was a chairman who's actually an emergency room doctor. And we were excited. How could an emergency room doctor not understand the necessity of insulin being affordable? Because just hours without insulin, you can end up in a fatal situation. And he refused to hear the bill. He refused to hear the bill. An emergency room doctor refused to hear the bill. And this confused me, confused the rest of the advocates, so I did some research. He received $28,000 from pharmaceutical and health products, $27,000 from lawyers and lobbyists, and $24,000 from insurance companies. And overall, $127,000 from just health in general. If this doesn't go to show you that our healthcare system is broken, then I don't know what will. We need change. 100 years ago, the co-discoverer of insulin, Frederick Banting, said that insulin does not belong to me. It belongs to the world. And so he went and sold insulin, the patent of insulin, to the University of Toronto for $1. And the same wish of his does not exist today. Now I want to leave you with, how can you guys all help? Whether you have a connection with type 1 diabetes or not, spread the word, write to your legislators. Ask them why they aren't capping the price of insulin. Why aren't they regulating this? Or in turn, run for office. Sponsor your own legislation. And this goes for any issue that you're passionate about. Because truly, at the end of the day, patients are going to win this fight because insulin deserves to be for all. And insulin is a human right as well as healthcare. So thank you.
Let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
for Retired Persons wants us to build an
So today, I want to talk to you about a mistake I made. A mistake where I had to be very vulnerable and admit that I was wrong. Several years ago, I met a former police officer in Richmond, Virginia. He was 42 years old. This man became injured in the line of duty, became paraplegic, and could not walk or live on his own. He was part of a federal demonstration program that transitioned people with disabilities out of nursing homes back into the community. This program paid for his brother's house to be retrofitted with all of the accommodations this man could actually need in order to thrive. He was very gracious and grateful to no longer be institutionalized, and we thought this was progress. At least that's what we thought. You see, this man was living alone for most of the day. He had a personal care attendant who came in during the morning and left around noon. His family didn't come home until about 6. He would have loved to fill those days and those times going to the community center, checking out a book out of the library, or in some cases, going to the police station to visit his buddies. Unfortunately, he lived in a cul-de-sac, and public transit only came into the entryway. So I want you to imagine this. He could see the bus stop from his living room window, but he had no way to get to it, let alone on it. With no access to public transit, he had no way to really be part of the community. He had no way to really fully enjoy the many things you and I take for granted. I spent a lot of time thinking about this man. You see, I had to get very real with myself and say that I was wrong and had been wrong for a very long time. I thought that when we transitioned people out of institutions, that we had solved their problems, that it was a job well done. What I didn't think was the fact that the lack of community integration and access to public transportation meant that he was isolated for most of the day and frankly a prisoner of his own environment. What we had done was transition him out of one institution to another. It's hard and difficult to admit a mistake to yourself. It's hard and difficult to be vulnerable to yourself or even to someone else. But that sense of vulnerability is what we need today in order to solve the nation's problems. And honestly, we need to start that now. Time is moving so much faster. In The Tale of Two Cities, Charles Dickens said, it was the best of times and the worst of times. And no doubt the last 2 years have been the worst of times. Millions of people have died and are dying from this pandemic. Hundreds of thousands of businesses closed, with some never to reopen. Within days and weeks of the pandemic shutdown in March of 2020, millions of people lost their jobs, their livelihoods. Some of them are family members, some of them are friends, in some cases, it might have been us. Through all of this, given the fact that millions of people have died from the pandemic, and our world has been turned upside down as a result of this pandemic, the United States has also been going through a period of racial unrest like never before. This pandemic has shown a glaring, unending spotlight on the weaknesses of our systems, the very systems that have created the foundation to ensure that we have an opportunity to live a longer, healthier, and more prosperous life. We have some really big problems to solve. We have some really big problems to solve. But I tell you this, we cannot and should not go back to normal. That normal excluded entire communities. That normal excluded entire income brackets, ages, races. That normal deprived so many people of life basic necessities. We've been through a lot, but I hate to say this, the tough part starts now. When tough things happen in our own lives, we take an honest look in the mirror to recenter and remind ourselves of who we are and reaffirm that things will get better. When the United States and the world looks in that mirror, we cannot have hope things will get better. We have to make them better through action. We cannot allow the last 2 years to have been in vain. So today I want to talk to you about 3 things that we need to do and we need to do today. The first one is that we have to have a conversation about what independence really means. The second is the idea that we need courage to start to build anew. And then finally, inaction is a decision we cannot afford to make. So first, let me talk to you about what independence really means. We have, for years, and frankly for decades, a false sense of independence. We believe that we have the right to independence. We have forgotten, though, that in order to value and embrace independence, we have to understand and accept interdependence or mutual dependence. True independence relies on us being mutually dependent on others. Think about that. When you're interdependent, you understand that you can do more working together than you can ever do on your own. And the things that we do on our own, based off those collective accomplishments, is what makes us happy, fulfilled, and healthy. Being interdependent is the only true way and long-lasting way to be independent. It's a win-win proposition that so many of us forget. For some reason, we get clinging to this notion that in order to be heard, in order to matter in our society, we have to be independent and don't need anyone for anything. That notion is based off fear and is one that we have to reckon with in order to be able to solve and be ready for the next challenges that comes our way. When you embrace the notion of fear and anger, you start to accept things that are unacceptable. You start to tolerate things that are frankly not tolerable. As a society and as a community and as individuals, we have to move from this idea of independence, which is based off an attitude of I, to the idea of interdependence, which is based off the attitude of we. Interdependence matters. People don't rely on buildings or organizations. People rely on people. It is only through this pandemic have we started to acknowledge out loud, see, and understand the impact of our decisions on other people. Not a data column on a spreadsheet, but real, actual people. That is interdependence at its core. And we have to be interdependent in the absence of ageism, sexism, and racism. Now is the time to build and create a new narrative of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and adopt a new vision for our collective future. One that embraces our interconnectivity and our interdependence. Second, I want to talk to you about courage, because it takes courage to build something new. Brian Stevenson, the founder and executive director of the Equal Justice Initiative, said that you cannot become an effective problem solver from a distance. There are details and nuances to the problems that you will miss unless you get close. Like I had to get close to that police officer in Richmond, Virginia, the one who could see the bus but could not get to it or on it. The one that I thought that we were doing the right thing and that it was normal, but it was not good enough. Let's be honest. It takes courage to get close to problems. It takes courage to admit that something that you supported now seems wrong. But COVID has demonstrated this and many other things that we need to address in terms of our systems in order to move forward. It takes courage to be able to listen to others. It takes courage to not just listen, but understand their preferences and their needs. And then more importantly, for those we serve, shift the way we think and see them, not based off what they lack, but in fact, in terms of what they bring. It takes courage to get close. It takes courage to build anew. And this is the time where we need to summon courage so much more than ever before. Courage is that mental and that moral strength to build anew, to persevere, to withstand fear or difficulty. The Latin word for courage is cor, which means of the heart. So these things that we have to do them with heart, trust, seeing the other person, and understanding where they're coming from. It takes courage to build anew. The third thing I want to talk to you about is that inaction is a decision that we cannot afford to make. Inaction means that things don't get better, things don't go the way that it used to go or the way that it used to be. Inaction means that things get worse. Inaction means that we don't understand, nor do we value the interdependence that I mentioned before. So I have a question for you. What would it take and what would it look like if we all had the opportunity to live our longest, healthiest lives? You see that disparities and inequities stifles economic growth, and they have been here well before COVID existed. We know based off research that it's not your genetic code, but your zip code that determines how long you live in this country. The average life expectancy in Florida is 80 years old, but we're seeing a widening gap in terms of longevity. If you live in Collier County, you can expect to live 83 years old. If you live in Union County, that is 67 years old. Think about that. The average is 80 years old. If you live in one county, you're likely to live to 67. That's literally a 13-year difference in life expectancy. Now, I want you to think back. What did you do in the last 13 years? Now, imagine if you didn't have those 13 years of life. Does that seem fair to you? All residents of all neighborhoods deserve the same number of years to be able to grow old with their spouses or partners, play cards with their friends, go to the local library, and watch their grandchildren grow old. We must act, because this longevity gap, if we do absolutely nothing, will cost our country $1.6 trillion in 2030. That's 8 years from now. We must act because this pandemic has put us on a global timeout for the last 2 years. The last 2 years, we've been on pause, and it's given us an opportunity to do something that's much bigger and bolder than we can ever do on our own. The danger, though, is if we think that these problems are unsolvable. They are not. So in addition to acting, we need to tell ourselves a new story. And then we need to tell that story to others. We have an amazing opportunity to rewrite the script of a post-COVID America, a script where the sequel is much better than the first. We are the change that we've been waiting for. In everything that we do, and with everything that we have an opportunity to construct a future that builds wealth, strengthens health, and ensures the same educational and economic opportunity that benefits not just the privileged, but also those who are historically marginalized and everyone in between. This isn't wishful thinking. We can actually do this, but we have to be brave enough to want it, confident enough to plan for it, and courageous enough to make it happen. This is our time. This is our moment. We are at this crossroad for a reason, and we have an opportunity to reassess, redefine, and reprioritize what we collectively value and what we collectively say matters. So in closing, I want to share with you some words that means a lot to me that I hope will resonate with you. In his book, the late Congressman John Lewis said, "It is only in the continuum of change It is only in the continuum of change, through examining history, that we know where we stand. It is only through examining history. One day this pandemic will be history. Will it be a noticeable blip 100 years from now? Or will it be a defining mark where things got worse? That is up for us to decide through interdependence, courage, and action. Continuum of change, it's where we've been, it's where we are today, it's where we're headed. Where are you relative to where you want to be on this continuum of change? Again, it's up for us to decide through interdependence, courage, and action. And probably the two most important words of his quote, to become aware. Become means begin to be. Aware is the reflection of understanding a situation or a fact. Becoming aware is what happens when you get close, up close, to see the details. Like I had to get close to that police officer who we thought we were giving a sense of freedom when in fact we had imprisoned him in another broken system. So today I challenge you to be brave enough to be interdependent. I challenge you to get up close and personal, to listen and learn, make decisions and act, and to do it all with courage. I challenge you to become aware. No matter where you are on the continuum of life, you're never too old, too young, too poor, too rich to begin to be. I challenge you to not let others write our history books, but for you to start to write our history by solving the problems of this generation with courage and action. So let's write a new story. And let's make the script of America 2.0 more resilient, more inclusive, more powerful than the original. Thank you.
Jean's coaches are pure woman power. Melanie, Olivia, and Laura. Please a warm applause for them. Please welcome to the stage our group Por una Cabeza Trio. We're on the violin, we have Rebecca Masals, Carly Fulcher on the cello, and Xing Shuang Jing on the piano. Our tango dancers are Nathan and Nuria Kroc.
Next up, we'll be hearing from Shani Peter. Is medicine the only way to heal ourselves to make us feel better? Are there other ways? And how do we discover alternative treatments? How can real people take advantage of them? During a visit to a clinic, Shani Peter was inspired to use something that she loved to help people deal with the effects of Parkinson's disease. Shani Peter is now Dr. Peter, and she is interning at Michigan Medicine. Please welcome to the TEDxFSU stage, Shani Peter.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to start with a little exercise. Will everyone who can stand, please stand up from your chairs. Now close your eyes and focus on your legs. Feel the weight of your body on the bottom of your feet. Now shift your weight forward towards the balls of your feet. Open your eyes and take a small step forward with your right. Now backwards with your left. Try a side step to your right and another to your left. Congratulations. You have now learned one of the basic concepts of Argentine Tango. You may sit back down. Dance has been there for me my entire life. It supported me through immigration when I was 13 years old, through family challenges when I was in high school, through medical school, and now through residency during the COVID pandemic. I was first introduced to Argentine Tango right here through the Anello Tango Club at Florida State as a freshman. I was immediately captivated by the sophisticated, intricate, and complex nature of the dance. Anyone who's danced the Argentine Tango knows that sometimes it can be more like a love-hate relationship because it's such a sophisticated, intricate, and complex dance. You see, what's different about this dance compared to other dances is that we do not have a basic step. What we have is the walk. We have the forward walk, the backwards walk, side steps, and even a circular walk. And each one of these steps is broken down to the various joints and muscles in our body. The torso gets twisted as we contract our abdominal muscles one way and stretch the other. We lift the hip, the knee, the ankle, and start to shift our weight forward. As we fall into the next foot, we lead with our chest to stay in the line of dance, and so much more. But as you've seen in the earlier performance by these two lovely people, this process, among the dozens of others, is invisible to the naked eye, and that is the magic of Argentine Tango. Thank you. Thank you. Despite the love-hate relationship, I stuck with it the next several years. When I started medical school at FSU, however, it was significantly more challenging to find the time to dance, and when I did have the time, I felt guilty for not studying instead. During my first year as a medical student, I was lucky enough to be introduced to Dr. Maitland, one of our very own neurologists. Dr. Maitland graciously allowed me and a few other medical students to observe his care of patients in clinic and be exposed to neurologic practice firsthand. One of the very first patients I saw had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease and was accompanied by his wife. As some of you may know, Parkinson's disease is a neurodegenerative disease that is most famous for its resting, pill-rolling-like tremor. The disease slows people down, their movement, their speech, and even facial expressions. So as expected, this patient had difficulty with walking. As part of the physical exam, we asked the patient to get up from the chair and walk across the room. While the patient was able to get up from his chair slowly, he could not initiate that first step. What his wife did next really caught my eye. She stood up beside him in a side hug, and together they shifted their weight from one foot to the other, back and forth, until he was ready to take that first step. I remember sitting there and thinking, oh my goodness, this is exactly how we start every single dance in Argentine Tango. We come together in the embrace, and together we shift our weight from one foot to the other until we take that first step. And so by the summer of 2018, we had put together a study exploring the effects of Argentine tango on Parkinson's disease. In our study, we had participants who walk across the mat with 18,000 sensors that analyzes their walk and calculates a score representing their fall risk. Now, if someone healthy walked across this mat, they may score somewhere between 95 and 100. If a Parkinson's patient walks across this mat, they may score somewhere in the 80s. This means that when a Parkinson's patient walks, they are more likely to fall when compared to a healthy individual. That summer, we had 11 participants learn and dance the Argentine tango, and 9 participants with Parkinson's disease who served as the control group and did not participate in the lessons. Lessons lasted about 1 hour each, 3 times a week for 4 weeks, and consisted of learning the tango walk, balance and weight shifting, the embrace, forward step, backward step, side steps, and even pivots. To measure the effects of Argentine tango on Parkinson's disease, we ask all 20 participants to walk across the mat before and after the month-long intervention. Now, some of these lessons are quite challenging, as one would imagine, but what was most challenging was something I didn't expect. I learned that some people with Parkinson's disease will look at their lives before and after the diagnosis. Some of the participants were dancers in their before, or athletes. They were all people who were used to telling their body what to do, and it would just do it. A simple forward step that you and I don't even think about is a struggle. And overcoming that hardship, overcoming the memories of the before, was a challenge I did not foresee. One time, I was dancing with one of the participants when I suddenly noticed she had a tear streaming down her face. Of course, I immediately panicked and thought that I'd stepped on her or done something wrong. But before I got too ahead of myself, I asked her how she was doing. And she started telling me how she used to dance ballroom with her late husband, and how these lessons reminded her of him. She continued to express frustration that last time she danced, her body moved gracefully. And now she's in the after. Despite the mental and physical challenges, these group of participants was among the most motivated people that I have ever met. Not one of them gave up during the lessons, and some of them even seemed to enjoy it. This was easily one of my most rewarding experiences, and what makes it even better is that it worked. In our study, we found that learning and dancing the Argentine tango for 1 month, 3 times a week, does in fact reduce fall risk in the Parkinson's disease patient population. Why Argentine tango, though? Why not ballroom tango? And yes, there's a difference. Or other dances like salsa. Well, like I mentioned before, Argentine tango doesn't have a basic step. What we have are techniques for how to walk, turn, balance ourselves. While other dances may have similar techniques, they don't get taught until a far more advanced skill level. This dance starts with these intricate ways to move around the dance floor. It teaches people whose brains forgot the mechanics of a simple step how to walk all over again. As a resident physician, I have learned and seen the wonders of medicine, and it truly is wonderful. And even though I've only been doing this for almost a year, I have also seen its limitations. This study, among the dozens of others that explore non-pharmaceutical intervention for disease, shows us that we have more control over our body than we may think. Whether it's dancing, boxing, yoga, or Tai Chi, all of these interventions have been shown to be helpful in Parkinson's disease. But we don't have to stop there. Anyone with any medical condition can choose to do one or more of these activities, even if it's mostly for fun, with the side benefit of reducing fall risk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that amazing speech.
Thank you very much.
Shani's speaker coaches are Jack Fower and Kennedy Ray. Please a warm applause for them. Christopher Constantino doesn't see vulnerability as a weakness. For him, when we share our vulnerability, we create the possibility of new types of intimacy. As a professor in the School of Communication Sciences and Disorders, Dr. Constantino has discovered that when our words stumble, we open a new space for deeper communication. Please welcome to the TEDxFSU stage, Dr. Christopher Constantino.
I'm a person who stutters. Stuttering is genetic, it's neurological, and most people who stutter will stutter to some extent for their entire life. I don't stutter as much as I used to, and ironically, I don't stutter very much when I talk about stuttering. But my stutter used to be very frequent and very struggled. It used to sound something like something like it used to sound something like this. It's not so much that I don't stutter anymore. It's that I've learned to react to the feeling of stuttering differently. Most of you probably know what stuttering sounds like, but not what stuttering feels like. Stuttering feels like you're stuck, like your lips, your jaw, your tongue, your vocal folds are being controlled by somebody else, like you've lost control temporarily. Imagine, if you will, that we lived in a world where the primary means of communication was handwritten notes. And you've got this problem where every time you go to write a note, a ghost pushes your hand hard. That initial push, the initial loss of control of hand and finger and pen, that would be the stutter. That's what it feels like. But the person reading your note wouldn't be privy to that feeling. What they would be aware of is the result of that push on your handwriting. The way it interrupts your cursive, the way it breaks your letters. Now imagine that this world holds penmanship in high regard, that a clarity of writing is seen as clarity of thinking. That an inability to write neatly is equated with an inability to think neatly, or maybe to think at all. How would you write differently? You might try to guess when that ghost was going to push your hand, lifting the pen up at random times when you thought you were going to get a push. Your reader would see all the breaks in your script. You may squeeze that pen really, really hard so that when you were pushed, you didn't move so far. Your reader would see the rigidity in your script. It would seem tense, maybe making it sloppy. You might fight with the ghost after it pushes your hand, jerking your hand back down, trying to reduce the displacement of your arm. The reader would see the scribbles along the page as you brought your pen back under control. The reader wouldn't know which of those stray marks, what they're seeing, is a result of the ghost, and what is a result of you reacting to that ghost. You will have changed every letter you write rather than just the letters that were pushed. Stuttering works much the same way. It's an inherently unsettling experience to feel like a part of your body is no longer listening to you. And so many people who stutter do their best to avoid it and to try to hide it. On top of that, it's a deeply shameful experience. Communication is how we commune with each other. It's how we make friends, find jobs, find romance. If I can't tell you my name, what does that tell you about me? If you can't talk to me, how can you come to know me? And if you can't know me, how could you ever love me? On top of the shame of not being able to do something as simple as speak, on top of that feeling of loss of control, stuttering is stigmatized. The research on stuttering and discrimination is overwhelming. Children are teased and bullied. Adults are denied jobs or fired from jobs or moved into non-speaking roles. People who stutter are seen as less intelligent, less attractive, and less capable than their fluent peers, even though stuttering has no correlation with any of these. And so when you stutter, it can feel as though you are doing the most shameful thing you could possibly be doing. It feels a lot like being naked. Imagine if at random times, unpredictably, throughout your day, your clothes just fell off. Imagine you were giving a TED Talk and just down around your ankles. Right? I imagine you'd start acting different. You change where you went, what you did, who you hung out with, the amount of money you spent on belts and suspenders. You would be different even when your clothes were on. Stuttering's the same way. What we know about treating stuttering is that the more we let it happen, the easier it gets. But that's easier said than done. This is my area of research. I study the subjective experience of stuttering, so how it feels to the speaker. And what I have found is that the less the speaker thinks about stuttering, the easier their speech is, and the less it negatively impacts them. But now imagine you were walking around, ghosts were pushing your hands, your clothes were down around your ankles, and I said, just don't think about it, right? That would be inherently unsatisfying. And so through my years of having a stutter, my years of being a therapist for other people who stutter, of researching stuttering and teaching stuttering, something I have found that's helpful, that helps people to allow themselves to stutter openly and easily, is to have a reason to stutter. Stuttering is easier if you have a reason to do it. And I found my reason, and I think in doing so, I found a universal law of human nature, and that's what I'm sharing with you today in this talk. It's that the more time we spend naked, the more opportunities we have for intimacy. I'm going to say that again. The more time we spend naked, the more opportunity we have for intimacy. What's the essence of being naked? I'm going to argue in this talk that it's vulnerability. And in order to be truly vulnerable, you need two sides of the coin. The first is risk, right? To be vulnerable is to expose yourself to risk. In the case of being naked, what's the risk? I guess you're exposed to the weather, right? The cold, the heat, the rain. But you know that's not what you're thinking about, right? You're exposed to the judgment of others. They might reject you. By being naked, we expose ourselves to rejection. The other side of that coin, though, is intimacy. In order to be intimate, you have to first be naked. How does intimacy work? Intimacy works through mutual vulnerability. I get naked, and then you get naked too, right? That's how it works. Through reciprocated vulnerability. I learned to see my stuttering as an act of voluntary vulnerability, an invitation to the other to reciprocate, to get vulnerable too, to get naked with me. And I've had countless beautiful interactions that I would not have had I kept my clothes on. One time I was at a bar with a group of friends, and there was a man sort of outside of our group who heard me stuttering quite a bit, and he pulled me aside, and he said, I've got to talk to you about something. I've not been able to tell anybody about this, but I hear you stuttering, and so you know what it's like to have a stigmatized disorder. And then he just opened up. He has a family history of schizophrenia. And schizophrenia often comes on in your mid-20s, and he was paranoid that he was going to develop it. He overanalyzed every thought, every feeling, every behavior, comically aware that this very paranoia was a symptom. And he said, I can't talk to anybody about this because I'm worried they'll judge me, but maybe you'll understand. And we talked for hours that night. I had a conversation I would never have had he not heard me stutter. He saw me there vulnerable, and he got vulnerable too. And that's how communion works. Another time I was on an airplane ordering a coffee, and I had a particularly long stutter on coffee. The woman sitting next to me waited for the stewardess to hand me my coffee and to move on, and then she asked me, what's that like? What's it like to stutter? And I told her pretty much exactly what I'm telling you today. It feels like you're stuck, like you've lost control. But that's not the hard part. The hard part is the shame and the judgment from others. And she thought about what I said, and she said, I think I understand. And then she related my experience with stuttering to her experience growing up as a Black woman in America and feeling judged for who she was. And once again, we had a beautiful conversation that I would never have had if I had kept my clothes on. I don't think any of this is unique to stuttering. Stuttering is a means to vulnerability, but it's not the only means. We all have aspects of ourselves that we're trying to conceal, trying to keep under wraps, that we don't want anybody to know about. What stuttering has taught me is that through voluntary vulnerability, I can increase my opportunities for intimacy. And I believe you'll all have that power too. And so I want to encourage you to let your guards down, share with others who you authentically are, and make yourselves voluntarily vulnerable. Thank you.
Christopher's coach was Vachelis and Madison. Let's give them a round of applause. Our next speaker is Christian Hubicki. Dr. Christian Hubicki is a robotics professor who makes robots walk wherever people can walk. To be good walkers, he believes robots must adapt quickly to their ever-changing environment. As it turns out, Christian is no stranger to adaptation to new environments after being marooned in Fiji on the TV show Survivor. And he shares his stories from the lab and the island that taught him to make robots think on their feet.
Hello, my name is Christian Hubicki. I'm a robotics professor and a lab director, and I love to make robots walk and run like people. I love to make algorithms that make robots walk. I love to experiment with robots, big and small, with legs. And I love to study how animals move, to get inspiration for how to make robots walk and run better. And when I tell people that I like working with robots with legs, they often ask me, why? Why do you want to do this? And my first answer is, because it's cool, for one. You know, these are actually the machines I wanted to build when I was a kid. These are the things I saw in science fiction and movies that I wanted to build. It was always so cool to me, and I always knew this is what I wanted to do. But in addition to that, I think that legs are critical to getting robots out in our world doing things we want them to do. I want them to be able to deliver packages to our doorstep. I want them to do chores in our homes. I want them to charge to my rescue when I'm in danger. But right now, robots are largely confined to factories where their environments are tightly controlled. Not much happens that they don't expect there. But out in our world, it's full of surprises. If a robot's rolling around, it might encounter some stairs in our cities and curbs that it has to step over. And out in the natural world, it's no better. We have mud and snow and rugged terrain that we have to hike over. We need legged robots so that way they can adapt to the environment that they are in, both in their shape with legs, but also in their behavior. We need robots that can think on their feet, literally. Okay. So, as it happens, I have my own odd experience in adapting to new environments. When I was voluntarily marooned, in the islands of Fiji for the TV show Survivor. Survivor is this month-long grueling competition where you are deprived of food, you have to build a shelter, you are flung onto a tribe of strangers with whom you're competing in challenges, but also have to cooperate with. It's quite a harrowing experience. And when I tell people that I, a robotics professor, went on Survivor, people ask, why? Why'd you do this? And again, Survivor is incredibly cool. The whole concept is cool to me, all right? I love how they'll take someone like me, who is a robotics professor who writes algorithms for a living. This is my audition video. I send this in, and they say, this is a great idea. Let's put him on a desert island. Let's see how he adapts to that. Oh, thank you. I wasn't expecting that. No, so how do I adapt to this new environment? You know, robotics professors are not trained to be on desert islands. If we are, I missed that day in robot school. But so how would I adapt to this environment? And to me, I was actually very surprised how it all went. I used my algorithmic knowledge to solve puzzles and challenges to win things for my tribe. And I would use robotic search methods to search the island during treasure hunts to find hidden immunity idols and things that would help me in the game. So overall, I was very pleased, and it underscored the importance of adaptation in my life. And furthermore, it also highlighted to me how the human experience of adapting to something new and the engineering of making robots do the same thing actually went hand in hand. So, back to robots. What do robots need to adapt to? The first thing they need to adapt to is their own limitations. And this is particularly true of legged robots, where their primary limitation is actually the battery on their back. It just runs out of juice too fast. Most robots that walk around run out of juice in an hour or two. They just run out of power, whereas humans can run whole marathons without stopping to refuel. So it's a big problem for robots, and they need to be able to adapt to those limitations. So me and my colleagues came up with a control algorithm that would adapt a robot's behavior to its energy limitations by making it walk as efficiently as possible. And we decided to apply this to this robot here called Durus. This is a prototype search and rescue robot for the next generation of robotic technologies, and we wanted it to walk as far as possible, on as long as it can on a battery charge. So what we did is we created this control algorithm for which the first thing it would do is it would look at this robot and then derive the math equations for how it moves. Now, they were quite complicated. If you were to write them out by hand, the paper you would use would cover 2 football fields. So, yeah, wow, indeed. It's very complicated. Then it would take those equations and then run it through another algorithm that would take all the joints of the robot and figure out what the best possible motion was for an efficient walking motion, use as little energy as possible. And when we put this on the robot and booted it up, this is what it did. It walked, okay? And not only did it walk meeting our efficiency goals for the project, it also walked quite naturally, in the sense that it would stick out its foot, land on its heel, roll onto its toe, and have gravity help it lunge to the next step. Very human-like in that way. And we didn't tell it to walk like a person. The algorithm, as a consequence of adapting to its limitations, walked like a person as a consequence. Remember that for later. So the next thing that robots need to be able to adapt to are disturbances. Disturbances are anything that get in your robot's way or push your robot. You know, if you pushed me, please don't, but if you did, I would have to catch myself, right? So robots, things will surprise it, and it needs to be able to adapt to these disturbances. And this was very important for this robot we made called Atreus. Now, Atreus is this prototype, next-generation agile robotic platform. That was the purpose of it. And it was super important for us to give it control algorithms that would make it adapt to disturbances, okay? And we started off very, very simple. We started by making control algorithms that would just step in place, and we give it little disturbances, little pushes. So we did this experiment, which is one of my favorites, where we just hit Atreus with dodgeballs over and over again. It's fine. Atreus is cool. So Atreus is constantly correcting, and we eventually did knock it down though, but we did cheat. We hit the emergency stop button. So you know, if you ever need to take down the robot, emergency stop. Pro tip from Dr. Hubicki. But this was all just a ramp up, okay, to a much more common disturbance than dodgeballs for walking robots, tripping. So Atreus is actually blind. So when we tell Atreus to walk forward, it has no idea that this platform is in its way. It's a complete surprise. And yet Atreus is able to adapt whenever it stumbles on the robot. It stumbles on the obstacle. Let me show you that one again. It actually stubs its toe right on the edge there and kicks to the side and catches itself and keeps going. You know, in a lot of ways, not only is it very adaptive, that's what I like to do if I were tripping on something. I stub my toe and I put my foot out to catch myself. Human-like in another way. So another thing that robots need to adapt to are the tasks that we give it, okay? You know, robots can't just do one exact precise thing. When something happens in the world, we need them to do something new. They have to be able to adapt to that new task. And even if it's a walking robot can't just walk at one speed. What if we're in a hurry? What if we need to get somewhere faster? Well, we actually tried this out with our Atreus robot and our control algorithms to see how adaptive they were to increase speeds. So we took it out to this football stadium here and told it to go faster, 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 as fast as we could go. Got a touchdown, apparently. And we found that it actually went at a new top speed, which is good. That's what we kind of wanted it to do. But what surprised us is how it achieved that top speed. We were telling it to walk faster and faster, and we looked at the data after the test was over, okay? After the test was over, we looked at the forces on each leg, left leg, right leg, so on and so forth. And there was these little gaps in the middle there. See that? That means that there was no force on either leg. It was in the air, meaning it wasn't walking, it was running. And in order to adapt to the task that we gave it, it ran instead, much as like I would have to do if I were in a hurry, okay? And finally, I want to talk about adapting to environments. And this is a great opportunity to go back to my experience on Survivor. You see, after about a week or two in the game, I had been on a tribe with people I had gotten to know. We had figured out how to work with each other. We worked together well. I knew all about them. Then all of a sudden, there's a twist in the Survivor game. And they shuffled up all the tribes into new tribes. My environment was now changing. Now on my tribe was a couple of people I want to point out. One was this gentleman here. His name is John, and he is a professional wrestler who goes by the name the Mayor of Slamtown. And also this man here, his name is Dan, and he is a police officer, a SWAT team member, and in his spare time models for the covers of romance novels. Now for point of comparison, this is me at the exact same time. That's what I look like. So this was not my typical crew, right? This is not what I'm used to being around. My environment had changed, right? And this is a little scary on Survivor because it's important to blend in with your tribe, okay? That's one of the fundamentals of the game. So we get to talking, the three of us, and then it comes up in conversation that maybe Christian can become one of the brochachos. The brochachos. I was curious what the brochachos were, naturally. And he said, well, we are a club of people that care about workouts and physical fitness and being at peak performance. I'm like, okay, this is an exciting moment for me. That's me at the time. I need to become a brochacho. I need to adapt to this new environment. So I wasted no time. I started to draft the bylaws of the brochachos. I created the Constitution, which involved doing pull-ups every morning, which I did. I had to climb a tree to do them, which was its own form of comedy. But we all got along really well. We became fast friends and worked together greatly. I had adapted to my environment, just as we want robots to do. So what does a robotic environment look like? Well, typically, a robot's environment is the terrain it's walking on. You know, the terrain could be this flat ground here or this carpet, or it could be out in the wilderness or out in the beaches, like sand. I got plenty of that on Survivor, that's for sure. And so I was curious, what would it be like for a robot to jump or to walk on sand? And we actually tried this out with our robot Atreus. Well, half of the robot Atreus. This is actually just one of the legs of Atreus instead of two. And because it only has one leg, it can just hop up and down. That's all it can do. And we were trying some early preliminary hardware tests and just to see if we can get the robot hopping up and down well. And it was doing fine. And I said, hey, what if we had it hop on some sand? Maybe it would be like a little bit of a challenge for the robot. You know, the sand would, bend a little bit underneath the robot's foot. It'd be a minor challenge for our control algorithms. We'll see what happens. So we tried the test. We pushed the robot over onto the box of sand. and actually plunged down all the way down to the bottom of the box, which I didn't expect. And the robot didn't expect it either. And somehow, there but for the grace of this robot, it survived, luckily. Now, I took the entire process in stride. I kept my cool. And I want to point out that these photos were taken 6 years apart. Guess we don't all change that much. So I was surprised, as was the robot. But the thing is, in real life, if you or I go out to the beach and we touch sand, the first time you might be like, oh, that's nice and squishy. But by the second, third, or fourth time we touch it, we're no longer surprised. We know it's soft. We have learned the terrain every time we touch it. Well, let's do that with the robot too. Let's use some machine learning techniques to have it learn what it's touching every time it touches it, and then learn it, and then adapt for the future. It'll adapt to the terrain. So we did this with a different robot here, a different jumping robot we put on sand, and we tasked it to jump up to that line, at the little green line at the top. And every time it would jump, it would feel the ground and learn what it was jumping on and try again. And after a few jumps here, see, it jumps a little low, a little high, and just right. And it has learned what it's jumped on and how to jump on it, okay? And this is great because we can also have it jump on different things. We can take it back to hard ground, for instance. So here's a robot, that same robot hopping on hard ground. And you can see it kind of just bounces like that. But what if we instead wanted to stick the landing? Well, a different task that needed to adapt to. Well, we can do that. We can tell the robot, hey, stick the landing this time. And sure enough, boom. And you'll notice that, so you'll notice that, when I looked in the background, so let's go back a second here. So you'll see that it stuck the landing, okay? And so I noticed that so I was very pleased with how it stuck the landing. And then when I looked in the background of this jump where Michaela Maroney stuck the landing, you'll see that there was a judge there and a very particular reaction that I feel like I can relate to. So I've shown you a lot of ways that robots need to adapt to their environments and all the things they need to adapt to. But I hope you notice that when robots started to adapt better, they started to act a little bit more like us. I think that's interesting. And it makes me take a look at myself when I'm doing things in everyday life. Maybe I'm the answer to how to make robots function better. And it reminds me of something people say about the sciences, that when you talk to an astronomer, let's say, and you ask them, why do you like astronomy? And a lot of them will tell you, the thing I love about astronomy is I can look up at the stars and see them in an entirely new way than I ever saw before. And it's because I understand more about what they are and how they work. And for me, with robotics, it's the same thing, except I don't look at everyday life the same way again. Everything I do, whether it's something crazy on Survivor, or just normal everyday life, or just some normal surprise I might do for no apparent reason. I'll take this tool here I use. I'm going to try to catch it. How did I do that? What calculations did I use in order to do that? Could I make a robot do that? And so I look at life in a very different way. And to me, that is really cool. And with that, thank you all for your time. Thanks for having me.
Christian coaches are Nang Dim and Emma Robbins. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Please welcome to the TEDxFSU stage, the Detweiler combo. We have Nigel Harvey on the saxophone. Warm applause for him. We got Dakari Brantley on the drums. We have Zach Kahn on the bass. Bryce Andrew on the piano. And Hannah Pascal as the vocalist.
Do I want you? Oh, do I, honey? Do I want you? Oh my, do I, honey? Did I do? Do I need you? Oh my, do I, honey? Did I do? I thought that I'm the one who found you. That's why I'm always hanging around you. Do I need you? Oh my, do I, honey? Did I do? I'm glad that I'm the one who found you. That's why I'm always hanging around you. Do I want you? Oh my, do I? Honey, did I do? Honey, did I do? Thank you.
And Weiler combo for that incredible performance, and Hannah Pascal. That concludes TEDxFSU. Stay.
Here we have Productions, Joel Silver, and Zach Carmelingo as our video producers. Chris Bryan and Sean Gordon sound in making TEDxFSU sound great.
The organizing partners for this year's event are the FSU Alumni Center, who have provided this amazing space and support throughout. Julie Decker, Joanna White, and Whitney Powers at the Alumni Associate have been amazing.
FSU's Center for Leadership and Social Change has supported TEDxFSU since its beginning, and Paige Renz has done an incredible job in bringing all pieces together.
Tell Paige to come all the way to the front.
Paige, please come all the way to the front.
Whenever we had a problem that had to be addressed, it was Paige Renz who did it. She is the mother of all that.
We want to thank our presenters and performers. They have worked so hard for this event today, and they have done an incredible job. I know they also want to thank their speaker coaches who have made it possible for them to deliver these amazing speeches.
But the real power behind TEDxFSU is the team of students who have made it happen. First, we need to recognize our TEDxFSU Executive Committee. They are all survivors of previous TEDxFSUs, and they have been working for over a year on making this happen. Amy Nee, Amy Nee, our tireless executive chair, who was amazing at coordinating our whole group. Madison Finley, our fabulous coordinator of coaching. Jack Bart, who has been our marketing director and video expert. And Hiso Han, our fantastic coordinator of our performers. And our TEDxFSU steering committee did the fabulous work making this event happen. Steering committee, come on up. Oh, okay. It's these students' hard work, energy, and spirit that have made this production possible.
And we wanted to thank you, the supporters of TEDxFSU, be it here in person or be it online. And yes, we're celebrating TEDxFSU 2022, but tomorrow TEDxFSU 2023 will begin. And if you want to become part of it, fill out the form on TEDxFSU.com.
In just a few moments, we'll invite you to join us for reception, where you'll have an opportunity to talk with all of our presenters and performers.
Thanks again for coming. And at TEDxFSU, we have this special tradition on how we close our meetings. And I would want to take every one of you with us on this journey and close the meeting together with me. And we're going to do it as follows. So we're going to stretch our hands to the front. Please, everyone. I'm going to show it once, and then we're going to do it together. Okay, keep your hands forward. Let's do it together, okay? So I'm going to say go, and then we put our hands up and scream TEDxFSU, okay? Are we ready? Go TEDxFSU!
Joanne, reception that way. Right? That door for the reception.
Out in the hallway, guys. Yeah.